All right, this is Chapter 8, Lesson 1, Function Tables. So, first thing I want to look at is finding the output for a function table. A blank is a relation that assigns exactly one output value to one input value. In that blank, you're going to write function. So a function is a relation that assigns exactly one output value to one input value. So, for example, the number of wing beats output depends on the number of seconds. So, if a bird's flying, the number of wings, the amount that it flies per second. So the output is how many beats, flaps of wings per second that a bird might have. Okay? The blank blank describes the relationship between each input and output. In those two blanks, you're going to write function rule. So, the function rule describes the relationship between each input and output. You can organize the input-output values and the function rule in a blank blank. In those blanks, you're going to put function table. In a function, the input value is also known as the blank blank, since it can be any number you choose. The value of the output depends upon the input value, so the output value is known as the blank blank. In those blanks, you're going to write independent variable, it's independent, the input is independent, so you can remember it as in and in. Input is independent, okay? So you can give me any number you want. The value of the output depends upon the input value. So the input value depends upon the dependent variable, okay? So the output depends upon the dependent variable. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of examples. My first example says the output is 8 more than the input. So my output is 8 more than the input. So that means it's more than, which is addition. So we're looking at addition. So I complete the function table for this relation. The function rule is x plus 8, again, 8 more than. Okay, so I add 8 to each input. So for every x value, I'm going to substitute in for the values I have in my input column. So I have 10 plus 8, 12 plus 8, and 14 plus 8. Okay? When I add these together, 10 plus 8 is my output, so it's 18. 12 plus 8 gives me 20, and 14 plus 8 gives me 22. For number 2, the output is 3 times the input. So 3 times, that's multiplication. Complete the function table for this relation. The function rule is 3x. Multiply each input by 3. This 3x right here means 3 times x, not just putting a number next to it and calling it a day. Okay, so this is 3 times 4. Again, I'm substituting my input value in for x. 3 times 6 and 3 times 9. So 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times 6 is 18. 3 times 9 is 27. All right, for number 3, we have the output is 6 less than the input. Complete a function table for this relation. The function rule is blank, so subtract blank from each input. So the output is 6 less than the input, so less than is subtraction. So I'm going to take x minus 6. That's my function rule. So I'm subtracting 6 from each side. So I start with x minus 6. So I'm taking 12 minus 6, 14 minus 6, 16 minus 6. 12 minus 6 gives me 6. 14 minus 6 gives me 8. And 16 minus 6 gives me 10. All right, finding the input for a function table. The input and output of a function table can be represented as a set of ordered pairs, or a relation. In this lesson, the x values represent the input and the y values represent the output. So, before we were finding the output once we were given the input, now we're going to work backwards, finding the input when we're given the output. Okay, so let's take a look at two examples. My first example says, find the input for the function table. Use the work backwards strategy to determine the input. So, if my output is 8, 12, and 16, my function rule was 4x, okay? So here I'm multiplying. So I want to think about what the opposite or the inverse operation is for multiplication. The inverse operation is division, so I divide each of my outputs by 4. So for 4x, instead of 4 times something gives me 8, I do the opposite. 8 divided by 4. 12 divided by 4, and 16 divided by 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. 12 divided by 4 is 3, and 16 divided by 4 is 4. You can always go back and double check and make sure that these are correct. 2 times 4 does give me 8. 3 times 4 does give me 12, and 4 times 4 does give me 16. All right, for number 5, it says find the input for the function table. Use the work backwards strategy to determine the input. If the output is found by multiplying by 2 and then subtracting 2, okay, so that's what my function rule is, right? I want to work backwards. Now, if you remember, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, was parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. So you want to think about that, but you want to work backwards. So, the first thing I want to work with is the addition, subtraction portion. So right now I'm subtracting by 2. So the inverse operation of subtraction is addition. So I'm going to add by 2. And then the inverse of multiplication is division. So I divide by 2. So for this one I'm going to do 4 plus 2 divided by 2. And then I'm going to do 8 plus 2 divided by 2. And then 12 plus 2 divided by 2. 4 plus 2 gives me 8. 8 divided by 2. 4 plus 2 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 8 plus 2 is 10. Divided by 2 is 5. 12 plus 2 is 14. Divided by 2 is 7. Okay? So the input is found by adding 2 and then dividing by 2. All right, there are a couple of try problems out below. I want you to go ahead, pause the video, try them out, and when you're done, we'll go over the answers together. All right, now that you've had a chance to try out the try problems, let's go over the answers together. So, the first one I have is letter A. Okay, I have my inputs and I'm trying to find my outputs. My function rule is 4x, so I'm multiplying each of my inputs by 4. 4 times 3, 4 times 4, and 4 times 5. 4 times 3 is 12, 4 times 4 is 16, and 4 times 5 is 20. For letter B, I'm given my inputs and I need to find my outputs. My function rule is 3x minus 4, so 3 times my value of x minus 4. So in this case, 3 times 2 minus 4, 3 times 3 minus 4, 3 times 4 minus 4. 3 times 2 is 6, minus 4 is 2. 3 times 3 is 9, minus 4 is 5. 3 times 4 is 12, minus 4 is 8. For letter C, I need to find my inputs given the outputs. So I have 12, 14, and 15. My function rule is x plus 5. So I need to subtract since the opposite of addition is subtraction. So I need to do 12 minus 5, 14 minus 5, 15 minus 5. 12 minus 5 is 7. 14 minus 5 is 9. And 15 minus 5 is 10. For letter D, again, I need to find my inputs. So I'm given my outputs. My function rule is 3x plus 2. So I need to work backwards. Right now I have addition. The inverse operation of addition is subtraction, and the inverse operation of multiplication is division. So I need to do 14 minus 2 divided by 3, 17 minus 2 divided by 3, and 20 minus 2 divided by 3. 14 minus 2 is 12, divided by 3 is 4. 17 minus 2 is 15, divided by 3 is 5. 20 minus 2 is 18, divided by 3 is 6. And that is the end of Chapter 8, Lesson 1.